Hola mi gente, welcome to the Money Chisme podcast, where we spill the real chisme on building wealth without the bullshit. Whether you're trying to invest, grow that side hustle, finally get your money right, or my favorite, buy rental properties, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Violeta, a first-gen Mexican immigrant, real estate investor, entrepreneur, and your financial hype woman. Get ready for tips, tricks, and expert advice straight from nuestra comunidad, porque el dinero es power and we're here to claim it. Don't forget, you can always find helpful resources down in the show notes and in descriptions, so make sure you check that out. A question that I am starting to see is whether or not to start a podcast. How is it going to help your business? What's the benefits of it? And so with me today, I have Mafe Salazar, a podcast manager, to share her tips and tricks. And she is a strong advocate of using podcasting to promote your business and use it as a financial asset. So, hola, Mafe. Thank you so much for being here
Oh,
today.
thank you so much for having me, Violeta. I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Obviously, I'm a podcaster, and I'm excited to see your tips and tricks because let me tell you, it has been a process to figure all of this out. I'm still
Yeah.
figuring out. We're having an offline conversation of little things that I was still learning and everything. But before we get into that, introduce yourself to those who may not, be familiar with you.
Yeah, well, hello everyone whoever is listening. My name is Mafe Salazar, and I am originally from Caracas, Venezuela, but I moved to Vancouver, Canada 11 years ago, or I guess 10 and a half years ago. It's been a while since I've been living here, and I am a podcast manager, a podcast producer, and I have my own podcast from Tourist to Local. And basically what I do is just I help entrepreneurs launch and grow podcasts that people would actually want to listen to, because I am a believer that we all have a story to tell and that all of our stories have some sort of transformation that just made us who we are today. And I feel like there's power in your story. So that's why I'm so passionate about podcasting and telling your story, basically.
I will say that's one of the things that I am finding out as, uh, a podcaster. And I didn't realize for how long I've gone without sharing my story, talking about myself. That's the hardest thing. How did you get into podcasting? What is it that drew you to start a podcast?
Well, it was COVID. So I think I started this podcast probably around 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, but then it used to be called the Spanglish Show. Like that was the first iteration of my podcast, and I started that as a way to test and also to show to potential clients my portfolio and what I could do as a podcast manager, and then again also as a way to test different strategies and things and see what was working and what was not in the
Mm-hmm.
podcasting space. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's what kind of snowballed into me becoming a podcast manager, because before I was offering virtual assistant services. So I was doing a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of everything. And I remember one of my clients was like, actually, do you want to give it a try and then start producing my podcast? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I learned so much. And yeah, again, that kind of snowballed into me being becoming a full-time podcast manager.
I'm kind of curious on, and I'm sure the listeners are too, on what is it that a producer does? How do they help you with your podcast?
Well, there are many ways that I help people. Like the most common one is just basically they record their podcast episodes, they forget about it,
Mhm.
and they just give it to me so I can edit, produce clips for social media. I can also one of the things that I really like doing, and that's part of one of the packages that I obviously offer, is
Mhm.
strategy. So, yes, you are the one that's constantly working on your podcast, but if there's someone else that is looking at it from I like looking at it from a as in a bird's eye view, from the
Mhm.
very top, and see all the parts, because you as a host, obviously you have a lot of emotion tied to your podcast because you're telling your story, you're real vulnerable and all that things, that sometimes you're just so into your podcast that it's really hard for you to step back and see the whole picture. of what it is that you're doing with your podcast. And it obviously depends on the goal that you have for said podcast.
It's always good to have, like you said, that person that kind of gives you pointers and that constructive feedback that you might not know that you may be doing in your podcast. When I first started podcasting, I think I was just looking for a way to just share like my journey, my financial journey, my real estate investing journey, and all that. But I really didn't have a basic goal or anything like that. How can someone figure out where their goals are? How do you feel if it's somebody that just likes to talk on the microphone?
Well, this is honestly like this is one of the questions that most people ask. It's like I like to talk, so I should probably have a podcast. And
Mhm.
spoiler alert, you shouldn't. Just because you can talk, you just doesn't mean that you should have a podcast. Because what most people don't realize is the amount of work and production that a
Mhm.
podcast takes, especially if you have guests on your show. Like, one thing is to record like one solo episode, like talking about your expertise, being vulnerable, telling your story. And then another thing
Mhm.
is when you involve someone else, because not only there's like extra steps, but what happens if you only rely on guests for your podcast?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, people what people want from you is to hear from you, because
Mhm.
that's why they're tuning in. So I feel like one of the things that when starting a podcast, the thing to have present is that your podcast can evolve, and it's supposed to
Mhm.
evolve as you evolve. Because again, like, it's your story. Your experiences are what are shaping your journey, right? And that's one of the things that you can translate into your podcast and in your business. It's how you are doing that journey. So, but I feel like it's really, and I actually did this with my podcast like a little bit ago,
Mhm.
because as I was telling you, I don't think this made it to the recording. I can't remember,
Mhm.
but my podcast used to be called The Spanglish Show, and
Mhm.
like the direction was completely different, the description was completely different, the audience was completely different, the goal was completely different. Because for me at that point in time, it's like, okay, I want to show people what I can do, but also I want to tell my story. And that's how I started.
Mhm.
And then like it evolved to what it is now, which is called From Tourist to Local. And that iteration of my podcast started as, okay, I want to, again, like, I want to share my story. I want to share my journey. And
Mhm.
now it's like, okay, I have shared my journey with immigration, like moving from Venezuela to Canada.
Mhm.
But now I found myself in another like big transition moment in my life, which is like I'm just
Mhm.
transitioning into entrepreneurship full time. So that's another thing that I want to explore. And I think that's
Mhm.
why the name, like, From Tourist to Local, is also so good, because it's like it's a big transition, but then the theme is the same. The theme of reinvention, of figuring yourself out, is the same. Like, the core value is the same. But see, like, my name has changed, my description has changed, my audience has changed, like, since the moment when I first started this podcast up until
I started off just me, but then I had, for some reason, I thought that I needed to have guests like all the time and everything like that. So then it went from like all my episodes were just guests. And then I
yeah.
had to pull back because then it's like, okay, now my voice is getting lost because I started to like share, I wanted to teach and share my story, and now it's nothing but guests. And now this year I'm kind of doing like a mixture where, I do like half me and then half guests and everything like that. But I think I'm also going through that transition where, like, okay, so what now? Like, what am I gonna do with my podcast? Because for me, my goal is that I want to, help people get started in real estate investing and teach real estate investing, and maybe further down the line. Right now, I have a course and some resources, and further down the line, do coaching. So now that's where I guess I'm at now, and you're kind of in that transition as well of like switching it over to like a business as well. So how you are getting started with that.
Yeah, for sure. Feel that again, like, it all goes down to the foundation of your podcast, the why of your
Mhm.
podcast, your core value. Like, what is it that you want to do? And then for you, it's obviously how to educate people on real estate. Is that what you
Yes, real
mentioned?
estate investing.
real estate investing, right? So, like the basic thing that you have to like ask yourself is like, what do I want people to take away from this? What is the feeling that I
Mhm.
want people to have out of this? And again, like, what's the goal of the podcast in my business, right? Like, do
Mhm.
I want to use this? Because for me, like, podcasting is a way to build trust because
Mhm.
people are choosing to spend 20, 30, 40 minutes with you on their ears, either with you
Mhm.
or like someone else on their ears, right? It is time that they're taking they are taking you with them like on their day, right? So they are
Yeah.
choosing you for a reason. And there's an angle that you are showcasing that is what people want to listen to because at the end of the day, like there are so many money podcasts on the market, right? Like
Mhm.
you probably
Mhm.
know this. So many. Like there's so many
Yeah.
lifestyle podcasts on the market. But what are you saying that's different from what everyone else is saying, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's your experiences that shape how you like show up in business.
That's one of the things that new podcasters that want to use this as part of their business is like that's the decision that they want to make and how they can use podcasting for their business.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many ways that you can use your podcast for your business. Because again, like it's a way to build trust, right?
Mhm.
So and then it goes back to what do you want people to do? So do you want people to invest in your courses? Do you want people to buy like something like a specific product that you're selling? Like those are like some things that you have to consider when you're launching a podcast. Especially
Mhm.
if it's a business like if it's a podcast that's going to be an asset for your business and not something that you're going to treat as a hobby, which is what happened with me and I believe what you were saying in the beginning like
Mhm.
your podcast in the beginning and even my podcast in the beginning it was a way it was a hobby for me. Yes, it was a portfolio, but I wasn't really taking like I wasn't really including any call to actions that were very specific as to how to work with me, what it is that I
Mhm.
want, like what's the angle that I want to touch depending on like the whatever offer I am selling in that moment at that point in time, right? So
Mhm.
now I feel that I am more mindful when I am planning my episodes. I feel that I am more mindful when I am reaching out to guests
Mhm.
because it's going to like synchronize basically with the kind of offers I am promoting. So that's how
Mhm.
I am like that is one way of monetizing a podcast, just like what's it called? Advertise your own
Uh-huh.
offers, right? And then again, like you're advertising your own offers and at the same time, you're building trust with the listener, with someone that's like listening to you.
I did that mistake off the bat as well when I first started getting like interviews. I think I was part of that like scarcity mindset that like, oh my God, I'm just gonna like, get whoever says yes to being on my
Yeah.
podcast because I had at the very beginning and only I had a few because I didn't get a lot of like people interested yet because it was such a new podcast, but there is some
Yeah.
weird ones that I did, and I was like, now in hindsight, I'm like, okay, you know what? That did not align with what I'm trying to do.
But then you wouldn't have known that had you not done that, right?
Yeah.
Like now you look back and it's like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have done that interview, but I still did it. And then like that give you experience to have now a better podcast and to really like now consider who you have on as a guest.
What kind of things are you doing to make sure that if you do have like guests or making sure like that your episodes are, aligned with your why and your goals?
I feel like having really clear questions and having and being very clear on the angle that you want to touch with them because
Mhm.
they're a bank of knowledge, right? Like they can have like so many different angles. Like I can sit here and talk to you about like not only how a podcast can be a financial asset, but like why podcasting is so powerful or why storytelling like resonates with so many people, right?
Mhm.
But you have to keep in mind like as the host you have to keep in mind like asking the questions that are aligned with your why, right? Like your
Mhm.
why is you want to help people in grow their business in real estate investing. So how does that look like? How does this translate to your guests? Like how can you weave that in when you're talking to your guests or in the questions that you're asking
Mhm.
to your guests,
Mhm.
right? Because like at the end of the day, that's why people are tuning in, right? Like they want to know your take, but they also want to know like the guests or the other expert take on whatever topic it is that you're talking about.
I ended up like adding like a page onto my website to where like people have to go there and, I have several questions because that helps me figure out like, hey, is it somebody that I want to have on the podcast? Is it that they're about? And I made sure this time to have
Yeah.
like the brand values and all that stuff because there's a
Yeah.
few that will ask me and then I go look and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, our values do not align to what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do. And you always get those like PR emails and stuff like that. And it's so obvious that
Yeah.
they did not even take into account or like even try to look me up because
Yeah.
the name of my podcast on, the description, the title or whatever, even though the podcast is Money Chisme Podcast, I have the keywords as, like, the title or something like that, so it's always funny that they'll be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
love this episode on," and then it's all the keywords, the title, the log, instead of Money Chisme Podcast. I was like, "Okay, make sure that I am getting the right guest."
Yeah, you have to basically pre-qualify your guests, and I feel like
Mhm,
your process, like, for coming in on this podcast was really easy because you have, like, a clear questionnaire, and I
mhm,
think one of the questions is, like, "What topic do you wanna talk about, and how does this
mhm.
relate to my podcast?" So then guests have to, like, do their
Yeah.
homework basically to be on here because they really wanna be known, and they really wanna be talking about you really want to know that your guest is going to be able to talk about or cover like the topics that you want to talk about in your episodes, right? And you also have to make sure that they are the experts and they're taking the time to like not only because there are a lot of people that just go and pitch themselves to a bunch of podcasts, but what makes the
Mhm.
difference is who's being mindful about it. And like for
Yeah.
me, what it all comes to is like being mindful about your podcast, being mindful about your business, being mindful of the people that you have on, because sometimes it's easier and it's better to just have a solo episode than just a mediocre guest episode. You know what I mean?
Since you are a podcast producer, I kind of want to get a little bit into some tips for someone that may be looking to start their podcast.
Well, number one would be to be really, 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 really clear on why you're doing this podcast.
Mhm.
Because most people think that podcasting is just recording something on your phone, recording something on your computer, uploading it, and that's it. And
Mhm.
I mean, yes, it can be like that, but also like you have to edit your episodes for clarity.
Mhm.
You have to be conscious of the amount of work that producing a podcast is because it's not only like recording is a very, very, very small part of it. And then, yes, you have to be present. Yes, you have to like outline the episodes. But then before and after that recording space that you only take 20, 30, 40, 1 hour per
Mhm.
episode, like however long you want their episodes to be, you have to be really mindful about how you plan those episodes and how you plan those episodes that are going to weave into your business, right? Because before that recording, there comes the planning of the episode. What do you want to talk about on that episode
Mhm.
and how is that going to relate to the transformation that you want to offer in your podcast, right?
Mhm.
And then after you record, you have to edit. If you have intro, outro, you have to mix those elements into your podcast. If it's a video podcast, then you have to do like all the other elements. And then if it's a video podcast that you're uploading on YouTube, my recommendation is usually to have like different titles just because
Mhm.
YouTube is like a completely different beast.
Mhm.
But yeah, like if you're just starting, I would say like the thing that you have to focus on the most is the core of your podcast. What do you want people to know? What do you want people to take away? And then go from there. Because if you have that really defined at the beginning of your podcasting journey, it's going to be
Mhm.
so much easier. It's going to be so much easier. And I just redid that with my podcast. I redid the description because it wasn't feeling aligned anymore. And then again, like
Mhm.
I audit my podcast like a lot because that's part of my job, obviously. But also, it's always good to refine it and see where you are like in your journey. And then again, like you have to be really clear on why you're doing this and how is that going to be connected to your business. If you want your podcast to be an asset, if you want to be a hobby, then just by all means, just record something on your phone, upload it like on Spotify, on Spotify and then be done with it. Like, you don't have to do
Yeah.
anything. But again, like, you have to be really mindful if you want your podcast to work for you and not be a hindrance instead of an asset.
Yeah, let me tell you, the logistics of doing a podcast, I was under the same boat when I decided to do a podcast. Like, oh, it's just easy. Like, right, like put it here and upload it. And then since that time, I have tweaked this podcast so much because then it's like I gotta do the title different because of so make sure that the keywords that I'm targeting for my target
Mm-hmm.
audience is there and that the description I've done that description like at least 20 times by now because and
Yeah.
like you said, I'm
And it's
always
totally
fine tuning
fine.
it. And then you got like things like show notes and then the tags and then thinking of the catchy that one like even though like, sometimes I have AI to give me like help me with ideas and stuff and I fine tune my little chat GBT thing pretty
Mm-hmm.
well to kind of give me a good starting point. I have to put all the links, and then if I have a guest, then you have extra stuff because I usually like to do a blog with theirs and stuff. And so that's like
Yeah.
another beast because you're trying to, I guess, promote your podcast. So it's a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
It's a lot, but it also can be, and this is what I like about podcasting, that it can be like your main source of content because
Mm-hmm.
one podcast episode you can turn into so many pieces of content. Like there is so much juice on like repurposing the podcast episode because, for example, this podcast episode, like let's list like a couple of ways that you can repurpose this
Mm-hmm.
podcast episode, and it only took you well, we've been here for 27 minutes is what it says on the
Mm-hmm.
timer, but
Mm-hmm.
it took you like 45 minutes, 1 hour, whatever, like however long it
Yeah.
was. But from this hour that we're going to be talking about, you can have one blog post or maybe two blog posts. So that's two pieces of content out of 1 hour. Like, yes, you have to invest like time creating these like blog posts or these
Mm-hmm.
outlines, but you have the foundation now. Then you're going to have
Yeah.
clips for your social media. You can probably have 3, 4 clips for your social media, and that's 4 days worth of content. So
Mm-hmm.
that's 6 pieces of content. If you have TikTok, then you can, you can repurpose like these videos, like these little clips into TikTok
Mm-hmm.
videos, YouTube Shorts, like the same thing, just because you sat down, talked to someone else for an hour or however long it was, and that you have it. You can even like go back to the transcript and look at quotes that you can pull from the episode and then just have a carousel going. Instagram
Mm-hmm.
captions, you can just do like a B-roll over something, but then you have like your Instagram caption or something really powerful that was said on the episode. So I think that yes, it is a lot of work, but also like the ROI is really high because you get like
Mm-hmm.
all these things from just like 1 hour of recording. It like yes, ideally like it like producing an episode is going to take you more than an hour of recording because
Yeah.
of the pre and post like production, but you know what I mean.
I didn't even think about doing that, of pulling like a quote and just adding it to some type of graphic.
You can do the audio. You can just cut like clips from the audio over
Mhm.
B-roll and there you go. Like that's it. You don't have to do anything else. You didn't think about it. You didn't have to get on video, get ready, like all the things. You just have
Yeah.
it ready to go.
Yeah, and so my next, question is how to make sure that you are having an effective podcast, like, what are your tips to kinda, like, boost the downloads?
On visibility, I would say that like for me it all comes down to your why, but then also how you're promoting your podcast and where you're promoting your podcast, right? Cuz like you want to
Mhm,
find places where people that you want to listen to your podcast to be, right? Like where are those people hanging out? Is it on Facebook groups? Is it on communities, like co-working communities? Like I'm part of a couple of like free communities, and I use those communities to promote my podcast. I think this is how I found you. I found out that you were looking for guests through Latinas in podcasting. So that's one way of doing it. Just go to those communities and then just market yourself. Make sure that you're promoting your podcast. And then also like one of the things that people sometimes they forget to mention on their episode is just to ask listeners for a favor.
mhm,
Ask them like for something very specific. Say mid episode being like take a screenshot of this episode, like if you're listening to that this like
yeah,
do this right now.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this episode and you have time, take a screenshot and share this on your social media and tell me like what has been your biggest takeaway from this. Like find ways to weave in like call to actions that are
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like small, but something that it's gonna make your listeners share their thoughts on this episode, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a point in the episode where they're gonna be like invested in all that stuff. So it's gonna be easier for them to want to share this with other people. And it doesn't have to be like sharing on social. You can just ask them to share with one person that they really think that this is gonna resonate with them.
I'm really bad at doing a call to action. So I'm gonna have to use that one of like, hey, screenshot this episode and send it to someone that you think might be helpful, or
Yeah.
share your thoughts, tag me in your story or whatever. So yeah, a lot of things. I'm always learning things to do on this podcast.
And what really helps me like to remember those things is to actually put them on the outline and then like
Mhm.
highlight them. For me, like I do my outlines on Notion. So I just do like
Mhm.
a little like call out, like exactly after the point that I am after like a point in the episode where I think it's gonna be like beneficial for me to put it.
Yeah.
Especially because like my episodes, like my solo episodes are like very short. So I only have like a certain
Mhm.
amount of time to
Mhm.
tell people like to do things for me.
Yeah.
So, I think, yeah, like depending, I feel that when you're doing the outline, you know that there is a way for you to like organically say that there somewhere. So I think it's really helpful if you put it on the outline, even if it's like
Mhm.
the very specific words that you want to say, because then that's a way to like remind yourself to do it.
When I started podcasting, I always thought that you needed to have like at least an hour. For some reason, like I thought like, oh, to be a podcaster, you had to record for like an hour or whatever. Like,
Yeah. I don't think that your podcast should be an hour or I don't think your podcast should be like a specific length amount of time because again, like one, this is something that you can refine and that you will find as like the more episodes you record. So as you get into the habit of it, maybe it takes you less time to record that episode because like I remember in the very like beginning of my podcast, I remember I had a script, like basically
mhm.
word by word of the things that I was gonna say. Like I was so afraid of like fucking it up that I just had like
Yeah.
literally a script, like word by word of all the things that I was gonna say. And
Uh-huh.
now I literally have bullet points of the things that I want to talk about. And then like the things that I really have specific words for are the call to actions because those are the most important things on my episodes because again, like now that I am transitioning into full-time entrepreneurship with podcast
Yeah.
management, I want people to know about my services. I want people to know exactly what it is that I do. And I want people to discover my podcast, right? And I
Mhm.
feel like that's the like word of mouth is one of the most like to this day, even like one of the most powerful ways um that people find podcasts. I was actually reading a stat in
Mhm.
I can remember the place where I was reading it, but they were saying that word of mouth was like still one of the best ways of that people discover podcasts because again,
Mm.
like think about it, like someone that they trust, someone that's their friend that they trust that they've been listening to this podcast for however long, they're like, hey, like I feel like this is gonna be really interesting for you. Why don't you give it a listen? Maybe they convert them into a new listener. Maybe they don't. Like it obviously depends. But at
Mhm.
least you get one more download from then just like
Yeah.
sharing it with someone else. And maybe that person shares it with someone else. And then it's a snowball effect.
You mentioned that you provide some services for those that might be interested. What kind of services do you provide and where can they find you?
Well, my favorite service to provide is Podcast Launch because
Mhm.
I like to call it the Launch Lab experience because I just love seeing everything go from idea and then seeing the face of my clients when their podcast or like when their first episode or their trailer is published is
Mhm.
glorious. And I recently changed it. It used to be that I produced the trailer in 3 episodes, but now I really find that producing at least like 12 episodes, which is going to be like
Mhm.
3 months worth of content, is what really going to grow your podcast, especially like if you want to use it like as part of your business. And then like
Mhm.
3 months or like 12 episodes, it's really it's really like, it really makes the difference. So that's one of my like the services that I love to offer, just podcast launch. And then the other ones that I offer are podcast management services, from just editing your episodes, and then you do everything else from full service, like you record your podcast, or like you're obviously in charge of planning and everything, but we go over strategy, but then you sit down, record, and kind of like forget about it. Then you send me your podcast and I do everything else. I publish your episodes and then I create the clips and everything for you. So that's one of the ways that I can work together. And then as far as free offers, I have a free Notion template that takes you and gives you the step by step of how to launch your own podcast in 5 weeks and how to do it mindfully. So I will give you a link so that you can give to your listeners.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like a lot of people that DIY their podcast, like that's what they do. They're kind of just like, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I am just saying that maybe you don't have the budget. Maybe like that is not something that's a priority for you in your business. But I feel like most people, when they're like launching a podcast, and like it happened for me as well, like it's kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, you know? Because it's like, I don't know what's gonna work, because again, like you have not spent the time that I have spent like researching. You have not spent the time that I have spent like doing all these things. And I think, yeah, like having even a free resource like that like really helps, because if you Google how to launch a podcast, there's millions of pages that are gonna tell you how to do it. Like millions. Like there's so many ways that you can launch a podcast. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the why. And that's one of the things that I really go in, like really like deep dive, like really hard when I'm like launching a podcast with a client. Is like, why do you want to do this? Let's be clear from the very beginning.
You're right. I think that's the important part of launching a podcast, because you take that time to figure out your why. What are you going to do? What are you going to promote? How often, and blah, blah, blah. And, that could have saved me a lot of time, a whole year to figure, that if I would have just taken like a little bit of time working with somebody or whatever to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, like my podcast has 4 years. Out of those 4 years, I took like 1 year break. And only this year, 2025, and it's when I have started to be like really mindful about podcasting and about how to use that as part of my business. So you're fine.
We all learn from each other, and it helps us better, either podcasting or business or whatever it is.
Forgot to mention that it's like one of really like my favorite things to offer is strategy sessions. So if you want to launch a podcast, but then you don't have the budget to like go full out on launching like 12 episodes, then we can get on a call, a one-on-one call for 60 minutes. And then I give you like a simplified like podcasting dashboard that I will give you to when we get on the call. Or if you have a podcast and then you don't know which direction to take, or maybe you're a little bit lost on how to grow that podcast, or maybe you don't know how it can relate to your business, like that, those sessions are really good for that.
I'll make sure to have all your information. Do the work up front. Like, save yourself some time of learning the hard way. And I will see everyone in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.